G'day, legends. I hope that you're having a fantastic Sunday. You've had a fantastic weekend, and the Sunday blues haven't got you too bad leading into the working week. Now, as I'm recording this, there's multiple sources coming out and saying that there is large drone attacks against Crimea. Some are reporting up to 100 drones, which is similar to what we saw then the other day, say 2 days ago, against Crimea, striking targets in both Crimea and Russia too. Now, it is very unclear at the moment exactly what has happened, but I will give you a full update on that tomorrow. Now, in this video, we're going to look at maps. We're going to talk about the north. We'll look at an interview with Zelensky and AFP. We'll look at strikes and geolocated footage. Of course, we like geolocated footage. We'll talk about casualties, as well as we'll have, say, in the north, both Russian and Ukrainian sources information in this video as well. Now, first off the bat, a bit of information I sent off one of my sources. Now, a commentary by one commander that I know he spent, of course, a lot of time here, more so than I. But the commentary is Zelensky saying that there is no complaints about artillery is complete bullshit. And we can tell you firsthand, all units that we know lack ammunition of all kinds. Sabrina Singh is a typical talking head for the USG and just parrots whatever she is told to say. Now, what she was in was an interview talking about, can Ukrainian weapons be used inside the territory of Russia to strike targets? And the answer there was ultimately no. But let's talk about the war as a whole. Now, all big wars eventually turn from maneuver into attritional war, grinding away until one side starts to buckle, collapse, and then movements and agreements, whatever then come from that, whether economically, whether militarily, but eventually it has to move somewhere. But a lot of people like to draw conclusions between this war and wars we have seen previously, World War I, World War II, and go, we'll look at the amount of ground made week to week, day to day on this compared to this. Now, I don't think that there is a real comparison to be had there. Yes, we're seeing tanks and men fighting, but in those wars and wars prior and more recent wars haven't been as conventional recently, but those large conventional wars haven't included things like drones, night fighting capabilities, thermal. So we're sort of stumbling in the dark, learning a lot about how modern warfare looks as we're seeing this, and we're learning about what works and what doesn't work. So looking at, well, this amount of ground was made week to week compared to this, well, it's hard because now we have a 24-hour battlefield, which wasn't present before night vision, thermal capabilities, and now we have 24-hour surveillance on bloody every inch with drones, the ability to target both soldiers and tanks in the open from FPV or other drones, ATGM, guided munitions, all of this. Of course, artillery is much longer. So I think those comparisons, although there are bits and pieces we can make, it doesn't line up perfectly. Many people, many military analysts are learning exactly from what we are then seeing here. Now, speaking of this, many will claim that there's some four-dimensional grand strategy chess game going on. And you see this on both the Russian side and the Ukrainian side, that it's all going to fall into place and we'll see then this sweep across. And I just believe this late in the war, we haven't seen any of that yet. And I don't think anyone's moving the pieces on the chessboard particularly for that, especially that both sides now have a lot of experience in the battlefield, and as well, that the surveillance is so good. There's so much information. It'd be very hard to set something like that up. And we have seen a reliance on mistakes being made on the battlefield to then make ground. Now, I'm not saying that mistakes now won't present themselves. It's a war. It's undetermined. Of course they will. But it's not a sound tactic this late in the war to now rely on mistakes. Both Russia and Ukraine have gained a hell of a lot of experience. Now, in the beginning, I talk about that attritional phase, push, 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 until you start seeing a buckle. Now, this buckle is what I'm most concerned about in this war, because it could lead to something like a large false flag event. I think that is a real possibility. Now, what would this look like? Well, we don't know. But could it be to draw in other nations? Maybe drop a weapon of where there's no turning back from? And this drawing in of nations, this isn't just drawing in NATO. It could be drawing in China or India or one of these countries as well. And if we did see then the deployment of Western troops to Ukraine, I would say I think this expands the war potentially to cross that event horizon of a global conflict. So one way has to start losing really badly at some point in this war. Whether it's east or whether it's west, we don't know. Now, people will say, yeah, this is all done and dusted, but look, it's not. The war and the final product of where this ends, we don't know. But speaking of potential of Western troops deploying, we've seen France float the idea. We've heard the UK talk about it, but this is something that comes into mind, and I found this really interesting. It is an unpalatable prospect, but in a future conflict, are we prepared for video imagery of British soldiers being killed with drones being released on social media, perhaps even live streamed, as we see in the current Ukraine-Russia conflict? Are our next of kin notification procedures and social media responses and people that run these processes ready? Now, first off, I can tell you, no, these processes are not ready. And those processes in place, even back in the beginnings of social media and, fast news online, the process failed multiple times, even on much, much smaller losses. But this is something that people are going to have to think about if we did see, not only in this war, but in potential future wars too. That is going to be a real thing going on. But that's how I see now this attritional phase of war, now that maneuver warfare is really, really limited to maybe some small pushes. But let's have a look at the north straight off the bat. So up in here, we have a deep state map update of just this sliver in here, but still doesn't show of what we know to be a geolocation in Vovchansk, both in the center at the hospital and then on the eastern side here as well. But Deep State does have some other interesting map updates too. But we do know we had that footage of the Russian bloke falling off the veranda in the hospital. So speaking of that hospital, we do have some footage here of Ukrainian JDAMs then striking the hospital. So this is the hospital here, and you can see these strikes against it here, then bringing that down. Claimed that there are dozens of Russian troops in here. That said, in this whole war, we never really know. Now, many have pointed that this does look like a controlled demolition, but if you do slow down the video, you can see one of these bombs coming in here with its wings out. So that has then been struck and destroyed there. As far as casualties there, so far, there's only claims. But what we do know in this area is the movement has slowed down as it has hit more defensive works and, of course, urban centres where that will slow down inevitably. But in here, we do know there was huge concern with the walking over that we did see of defensive works and questioning what then has happened in other areas, deploying a smaller force in here to what we're being told and has had a lot of success up to, Zelensky has said, 10 kilometers. That is a long way. And I spoke about it yesterday. Well, that has basically added 10 kilometers onto any weapon system for Russia moving in and reduced it on some pushing then onto here, maybe now to be able to hit other defensive lines in the rear too. But this map here isn't showing much. But this is from a Russian source. I shared this yesterday, but some of the mysterious northern group got their casualties from landmines and FPV drones. 5% CAS so far. That is high. That is 5 in 100, 5% obviously, but that are higher casualties, and we do not know how many people actually then crossed here, and that may be under, it may be over, regardless. But I have this off then a Ukrainian source here talking about down in this direction of Lipsy, where we know this map is incorrect here too, based off other Ukrainian maps. But enemy are now advancing on Lipsy, and we have to somehow create a defensive position and line there. Traders have compromised construction of effective defensive positions and allowed the enemy to advance the way that they have now. We have to somehow fix this problem. Why do we always suffer the failures of the commanders and the chain of command? Why do we not have professional, educated and competent command structure in Ukraine? 10 years ago, people were told to prepare what was needed by myself and others, and no one did what was needed or made promises that were never actioned or done. It is traitorous criminal behaviour by officials and government. And that is directly off a source in and around here. He's reported to us before about the situation of what has happened and defensive lines in here that people have spoken out against. Now, Noel reports map. This is one of the Ukrainian maps that we then use, but let's line this up with the deep state. Now, of course, he shows his advancement down here near Lipsy, as well as in the center of Vovchansk here. That's not lining up between these two Ukrainian maps. And we do then have a Syriac update on this eastern side of the north here, showing a push still further out from where this hospital sits here, where we saw those JDAMs dropping. Russian army finally made new advances inside Volchansk, in which troops advanced south of the hospital, reaching this street. Then attacks with Ukrainian army began at the fire station located on the opposite shore of the Vovcha River. So fights happening now, according to Syriac, across the Vovcha River, just down then around here. But very interesting situation of what is actually occurring up in the north. And I won't be surprised if we then do see an opening up in other areas. Now, let's have a look on this update. So it's been 48 hours since this map updated, and we do have some other interesting pushes. So down Berestov here, this is what Syriac showed yesterday, was pushing to the outskirts of Berestov along where this creek line runs as well. So it's showing a Russian advancement there. That is still considered up in the north, although that was on Syriac yesterday, so I don't have his map update there today, showing nothing around Chasiv Yar, although we know the street fighting there is intense. Now we have this out from Netilyove as well, which does line up with a Syriac map update in this exact direction too, pushing down here, and I would say to try and envelop these areas from Novoporovsky, Urmansk and Netilyove in long-term what's happening here, as the commander of Avdiivka is still in charge of these areas as well. Now, speaking of Avdiivka, we have a Noel reports update here too. So bring this up, and we have this push out from Netilyove as well shown here, but a lot more controlled region between Urmansky and Netilyove as well. So up where my cursor is running here, showing under then Russian occupied territory, pushing then that front line forward, and that is off then a Ukrainian source. Now we'll push down just a little bit more. Krasnohivka, this is an area where we know there's been a lot of debate around where the maps are sitting. And it has seemed that the amount of geolocations coming out of here has been limited, but we have a Syriac map update showing just a push on this northern side today. During the last 7 days, Russian army made minimal advances along this street, where the Ukrainian army continues to put up great resistance. Meanwhile, during the last hours, Russian forces managed to take these two streets, reducing the Ukrainian presence on this axis in Krasnohivka at this farm base and livestock farm. In addition, the troops managed to take the trench system northwest of the hunting house. So pushes out just from the industrial area as well as the hunting house in these area down here, an expansion in the north. That is what then Syriac is reporting there. Now, a little bit further south, then we have Novomyelivka here, an area of which there was a lot of fighting for a long time, that break in and then push then through. But these two maps showing very, very similar. This is what we then like to see on the southwestern side of Novomyelivka, a change in the map. Russian army made some advances southwest of Novomyelivka. This is what we see. Because both maps are lining up, we can confirm that there was definitely 100% an advancement there. So a couple of moves on this map, still lagging behind in my opinion, but Robotnik. This map shows zero Russian presence inside Robotnik, which geolocations confirm is incorrect, as well as Ukrainian map. So this is the Noel reports map showing then the defensive lines, but shows a break-in on the southern side of Robotnik here. But then we had in a Ukrainian page, which is this one here, giving this video of Robotnik. God helps you through follow glory and will. We're fighting for our dear Ukraine with this drone footage. Now, I can't show you this drone footage. It'll be on the Telegram if you'd like to go and have a look. But if you look at where some of the geolocations are, then it gives you an idea of if this is where the Russians are, well, then we know where that front line grey zone at least should then be. So this top geolocation is what is out of the video, and then we've plugged in. So this is in the northern side of Robotnik, up here where this road comes out. So right up in here, what is shown as the outer limit of grey zone, we know there is a presence there. Yes, we know drones were striking it, but we definitely know there is a presence there. And there's not the only video, of course, of that shows presence in Robotnik. So that is, in my opinion, definitely being ignored of what we actually see in here. Now, Media Zone as well, who confirm Russian casualties, they have released a new update on what they say the casualties are, and we'll look at this compared to Ukraine's numbers, and we'll talk a little bit about this. But what Media Zone do is they go through obituaries, they go through social media, all of this, and then they confirm how many Russians have actually been killed from those reports. Now, they're saying recorded names, 52,700 in collaboration with BBC News Russia Service, a team of volunteers. Now, they are open, and people always say that typically, yes, these will likely be higher, as not everyone's going to have a public obituary or a post on social media. How much higher? Is it 10%, 20%, 200%? We don't know. But what we can say is this is about a tenth of what the Ukrainian figure is, which is near than 500,000 of, and this is when they say liquidated personnel, so that assumes killed, so nearly 500,000 compared to that. So it's significantly different. But what is interesting here, and regardless of whether it's half or whatever, this will still be very similar when you take into account large statistics around where the Russian deaths have been higher and lower. Now, of course, you can see in the beginning, of course, you're going to have higher casualties, and then it has reduced through here. Then in early, then 23, we have seen a large number of Russian casualties. This leads into the beginning of then Ukrainian counteroffensive, and then into then this year we have seen some spikes, but we have seen a trailing off of that. Now, regardless of whether this number is a half or a fifth or a tenth or whatever, that this is actually going to be very similar down here. So that is interesting to see where the casualties lift and rise. Now, people, of course, when I share this, will ask about Ukrainian casualties. Well, I don't know, and very, very few people would actually know. But what I will say is the majority of deaths and casualties in this war have been from artillery. Now, for months, it has been reported that Russia has a 10-1 or sometimes 20-1 artillery advantage. So in this, you can say that the Ukrainian claimed casualty is 6%. People have said about 30,000 of 491,000. So you're around 6%. And people do bring in doubt saying, but if there's a 10 or 20-1 artillery advantage, that does seem very low. And I can see the reasoning in that. But regardless on casualties, neither Russia or Ukrainian casualties, we have no idea of an actual figure on that. And even at the end of the war, we may only then get a range of how then that looks. Now, Zelensky had an exclusive interview with, actually, now let's talk about these strikes first. It's a bit more interesting because it's some geolocated stuff. So we did see those major strikes down in against Russia down in here, where a lot of warships have been moved from Sevastopol around to here because of Ukrainian drone boats having success against them, as well as then down around these areas against things like oil refineries. Now, we have a little bit of footage here as well. So this is some of the footage that came out in this area of a strike against one of these large oil storage tanks here on fire on the top. Now, I am no expert in saying how much damage has been or hasn't been initiated from seeing the burning. And I know people look at the color of the smoke and this and that. I'm no expert in this. But Brady Afric has released this footage that he's had put with lining up to this footage here. Anyway, but it has shown the before and after satellite image. So this is the May 3rd and then the May 18th after this strike. And people have pointed out this doesn't seem too heavily damaged. Maybe it's burning on top. I don't know, but it's not smoke in this image, so we don't know exactly how much damage has been caused there, although there are reports that there has been a 13% decrease in Russia's oil capability, which of course affects economic, but we don't exactly know. Now, what we do know is down in the port here, there are gates closing up, protecting then the warships in here, as well as there was seaborne drone assaults from Ukraine towards Russia the other day. So we can just see, and this will be fully on the Telegram if you'd like, just this massive amount of fire here. You can see the trace in the air. These are the gates closing up, and these are the ships in here against seaborne drones. You can see an explosion here. Now, I would not want to be living in one of these houses then on the other side, but strikes against those, and it has, and this is against drones out in the air. Now, again, we don't know exact numbers on anything yet, but just thought I'd show you guys, and you guys can make up your own mind exactly what has happened here. But we haven't seen any ships, say, sunk in that attack, and we're not sure if there's going to be a full attack on the Kerch Strait Bridge. For a PR victory, massive. But the amount of assets it may take to take that bridge down, which we know strategically has been brought into question of how relevant is it worth this massive PR win for maybe a limited strategic victory if it soaks up a heap of assets? I think that may be one of the reasons we haven't seen more assaults directly on the bridge. Now, Zelensky had an exclusive interview with AFP, and let's go through this. So, Russian offensive in Kharkiv. He has said they started the operation. It could consist of several waves. There was a first wave, and the situation there is controlled. So saying the situation up in the north is controlled, but it may just be the first wave of many. Maybe this was the reconnaissance smaller wave, and we'll see either a larger push in that direction or maybe another direction to throw off forces and have a deception to move forces around, potentially. But he's talking about 5-10 kilometers from the border point to where we stopped them. I won't say it's great success for Russia, but we have to be sober and understand that they are going deeper into our territory. 5-10 kilometers is a long way in this war. Look at previous offensive actions that have had a few kilometers. They want to attack, but they understand that attacking Kharkiv is very difficult. It is a big city, and they understand that we have forces there that will fight for a long time. If they are stopped, they will not die in millions for the sake of Kharkiv. Now, Putin has said Kharkiv was never an objective to take that. He talks about, of course, the buffer zone, and we've speculated that the amount of forces, even at that full 80,000, is not enough to take Kharkiv. Was that actually the goal? Probably more likely the goal was to create an opening here, maybe one in Sumy, to try and draw Ukrainian forces away from areas in the east and the south. They don't have the force of a full-scale offensive in the capital like the one they had at the beginning of the invasion. Of course, much larger numbers there. But even on Kyiv in the beginning, the number of forces here, many will say, were never enough to try and have an occupation of somewhere of that size. Now, Battle for the Skies, I believe that today we have about 25% of what we need to defend Ukraine. I'm talking about air defense. So still air defense, very limited. We've seen Zelensky asking, begging more and more for more air defense, and the West is struggling to actually come up with a solution to that. More interceptors, but not full systems, and Patriots are number one on the list. As for aircraft, I say this openly, so that Russia does not have air superiority. Our fleet should have 120 to 130 modern aircraft. In total, we need this fleet of F-16s in the number I'm talking about in order to have parity. So that wouldn't be superiority, it would just be parity in the air. This is more than the promises of modern aircraft, and people have pointed out, does that mean modern the ones Ukraine's getting, or the fully upgraded creme de la creme of modern aircraft currently? Now, people have said there's going to be some Olympic truce. It has seemed Zelensky does not want part of this, saying he can't trust Putin and that we're against any truce that plays into the hands of the enemy. Now, I don't know how this would play in if there was a truce for a few weeks. It may give Ukraine a break to actually have time to dig in defensive lines, start that mobilization, get the training done. Yes, it's going to give Russia the same, but who at the moment would benefit more from a 2-week break, Ukraine or Russia? I don't know. I'd almost lean towards it may actually benefit Ukraine more at this time. Call to China. We know China is going to be a fulcrum in this entire conflict of where it goes, whether it expands, whether it contracts, and of course the peace negotiations, which I've said, if China and Russia is not involved in a peace summit, I don't see the point of spending millions of dollars at a 5-star resort with 50 countries to come and just bloody hand shandy each other. Chinese leaders live a little bit with the feeling that if Russia loses the war, it's not a loss for Russia, but a victory for the United States. For them, it is a victory for the West, and they want to find a balance between the two. That's why I would like to see China involved in the peace summit. But we know that China is an incredibly important country in this. The West is afraid. We are in a nonsense situation where the West is afraid that if Russia will lose the war, and it does not want Ukraine to lose it. So they're scared what happens if Russia lose the war. People are scared because of the nuclear capability that we know we can't stop from ICBMs. That is something that has to come into every military planner's head that is sitting, somewhere very high in the world, but also doesn't want Ukraine to lose the war as well. So there is a real fine balance here. I'm going to do a video down the line called the impossible diplomacy in this war, between how far do you push one way, risking a collapse somewhere, risking this while trying to uphold world orders. It's an incredibly delicate situation. Ukraine's final victory will lead to Russia's defeat. And the final victory of Russia will lead to Ukraine's defeat. So both sides in this war have now made it a war of survival for their nation. For Ukraine to survive, Russia has to be defeated. And for Russia to survive, Ukraine has to be defeated. Now, I don't see it that clearly. I think the time will tell exactly how this comes out, and I have my own ideas of where the border and demilitarized zones and whatever may last, just looking at the military capacity of both Ukraine and Russia. But of course, things change dramatically if there was a deployment of Western troops or more strikes or false flags or whatever. Legends, that is it for today. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.